Footballtribeug channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Hope you guys are doing well. It's a beautiful morning down in Kampala. That's a part of Africa. A bit of a rainy one, so you will bear with me if my voice is not to the tune that you pretty much expect. But I hope we can ride along with me as we do enter into the review of match day 31 of the Premier League. Now, disclaimer, another disclaimer. My internet flies out, my power flies out. It is because it's raining out here. So that is going to happen. So our broadcast is cut short along the way. Please bear with me on this one. But like I said, welcome back from all that entertaining midweek action in the UEFA Champions League, in the UEFA Europa League, and the UEFA Conference League. We pretty much what the results were. We could not get over Arsenal's celebrations. I mean, they've been all over the place, so much to the irritation of their rival fans in Manchester United and all that kind of thing. But it's time to move on because the Premier League match day 31 does get underway as Liverpool gear towards the triumph of the Premier League title there because they only need 3 wins and a draw to be confirmed champions for this season. Will Arsenal look to delay that announcement, or will they give Liverpool an even a shorter run to the Premier League title? Because this weekend Liverpool will be in action against West Ham, while Arsenal will be at home against Brentford in a London derby, as they also keep in their minds that they do have a gigantic return leg in the UEFA Champions League against Real Madrid. So, will they rest players in that, leading to that? That's all we're going to be discussing. But for starters, let's look at the fixtures for match day 31. So, like I said, the early kickoff will be between Manchester City and Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace traveling to the Etihad, and that game does kick off at 2:30 p.m. East African time, and then at 5 p.m. we will have 3 games coming your way with Brighton at home against Leicester City, while Nottingham Forest will welcome Everton. Southampton will be at the St Mary's Stadium to host Aston Villa. Remember, Southampton are already relegated, and then Arsenal in the late kickoff on Saturday will be up against Brentford there. So Arsenal's is the last game for the Premier League on Saturday. That kickoff coming at 7:30 p.m. East African time for those of you that need to know. And then on Super Sunday, Chelsea at 4 p.m. On Super Sunday, Chelsea at 4 p.m. will entertain Ipswich Town at Stamford Bridge, while Liverpool will be at home to West Ham, same kickoff time. And then Wolverhampton Wanderers will be at Molineux to welcome Tottenham Hotspurs, who they themselves will be preparing for their return leg against Eintracht Frankfurt in the quarterfinals of the UEFA Europa League. Sabia, thank you for tuning to the broadcast. Very much appreciated there. And then in the late kickoff at 6:30 p.m., Newcastle United will entertain Newcastle United will entertain Manchester United for Sunday's late kickoff there at 6:30 p.m. So be sure to look forward to that fixture. And then on Monday Night Football, Bournemouth will be at home at the Vitality Stadium to entertain Fulham. So keep yourselves glued towards those fixtures. So like I said, we'll kick things off with the Arsenal preview in their game against Brentford. Now, I know the anticipation, Arsenal are still in that happy mood, a very celebrant and jubilant mood following their gargantuan win over Real Madrid. Mama Kenza, thank you so much for tuning to the broadcast. You're very much appreciated there. Thank you. So, like I was saying, Arsenal are still basking in their glory following that 3-0 victory over Real Madrid, in the UEFA Champions League quarterfinals first leg. Declan Rice with a burst there of brilliant free kicks, as well as Mikel Merino on target for the Gunners. But they'll have to, wake up from that celebrant slumber and turn their attention to Brentford. Oh, you're tuning in from Indonesia. Much love from Indonesia. Thank you so much. So they'll have to switch their focus to Brentford, a team that has not beaten them in the last 5 fixtures, because Arsenal have won 4 of the last 5 meetings between themselves and the London State and the London best club in Brentford, beating them 4 times and drawing once in the last 5 meetings. Now, I think in the last 12 meetings, the only time that Brentford have beaten up against Arsenal was back in August 2021 in that season opening game for the 2021-2022 Premier League season when Brentford beat up against Arsenal at the G-Tech Stadium by 2-0. Now, for those of you that do remember, Mikel Arteta did have grievances with the Premier League leadership because they had requested for a postponement of that game due to the cases of COVID-19 that they had in their squad in the build-up to that particular fixture. However, the authorities refused to reschedule the game, and Arsenal had to play it with some of their members absent due to COVID. And eventually, of course, they lost the game. Then I think it was Ivan Toney who went and then tweeted or posted on his social media somewhere, maybe on Instagram, that nice kick about with the boys, something that did not rub Arsenal the right way. And ever since then, they've given them a taste of their own medicine, beating them on numerous occasions since then across all competitions. So, but as far as the last 5 meetings are concerned in the Premier League, Arsenal have beaten up against Brentford at least 4 times in those very fixtures. So clearly, it's an imbalanced meeting when you look at the 2 sides that Arsenal have proved to be the stronger side. But it goes without saying that Arsenal have largely dominated London fixtures in the last 2 seasons, making this the fact. I think their losses against London teams in recent times have been against West Ham by 1-0. Previously, that is this season at the Emirates Stadium, that goal by Gerard Bowen. And then the other loss did come against Fulham by 2-1. That was last season at Craven Cottage. So, while Arsenal have dominated the affairs in London, they will be worried of this Brentford side because we're talking about a team that have won 5 of their last away fixtures, only losing to Newcastle by 3-1. So their away form has been quite impressive. While Arsenal have just had their home record dented by that loss against West Ham. So pretty much everything is on the table. Then, while Arsenal did win that game against Real Madrid, they had their injury concerns in the course of the match because Declan Rice was withdrawn with a minor issue, while Bukayo Saka had sustained a kick. Now, of course, the manager, Mikel Arteta, has come out to say that the 2 players are both fine. That's in the in the pre-match press conference leading to this game. But the reason as to why it's an issue is because he may look to rest them for this particular game to keep them perhaps or preserve them, give them a bit more resting time or more recovery time ahead of that crucial return leg at the Santiago Bernabeu. For Arsenal, Mama Keza is asking where I'm from. I'm from Kampala in Uganda. Thank you so much for asking. So, because of that very fixture, and then the other player, you all remember, although he played a whole chunk of the game and only withdrawn very much later on, was Urian Timber. But for those of you that do watch Arsenal games, do know for a fact that Urian Timber has pretty much played the last couple of games through injury. We've seen him get knocked down, needing the treatment of the doctors, limp back on and sort of ease himself back into the game and sort of grow into it and that kind of thing. He seems to be playing with an injury. He seems to be playing with an injury. That's what looks obvious to me. And it's similar to what Ben White had gone through all that long. He's played with a knee injury for a bit of a long time, and eventually the club decided that he should go for surgery. That kept him out of action for about 3 or close to 4 months. So, of course, he has since returned, but he's not the player that went out injured. He's needed a bit of recovery. He had a minor setback recently and had to be kept out of the match day squad. That was, I think, in their game against Everton, which Arsenal drew by 1-1. So that kind of thing. So with that kind of environment, with those kinds of injuries to Arsenal's backline, we all know Gabriel Magalhaes had his season ended with the hamstring injury that he did suffer in their 2-1 victory against Fulham. Then, although now we all know Kai Havertz is out Bukayo Saka has just returned in recent times. He wasn't his very best versus Real Madrid, although he was quite good. That goes without saying. So you try to read into the mind of manager Mikel Arteta of how he will look to set up his team, bearing in mind the responsibility that weighs on their shoulder ahead of next week's return leg on Wednesday at the Santiago Bernabeu. Will players be rested? My own assessment and speculation does determine that yes, some players will look to be rested. It is known that Ricardo Carafiori has resumed training. I do not know whether he is match fit to feature in this one or even make it to the bench. But if I were Mikel Arteta, I may look forward to giving Maz Lewis Kelly a rest. Not because he needs a rest, but because of his youngness, you would want him much fresher ahead of that return leg versus Real Madrid. Again, that will require him to have the best of his composure if Arsenal had to do damages to Real Madrid in that particular fixture. But back here, that is why my expectation as far as the starting lineup, I'll give you those kinds of insights. But Arsenal themselves have not been in any great form in the last 5 Premier League fixtures because they've only won 2, beating up against Chelsea by a goal to nil, and then the other victory coming up against Fulham, beating Fulham by 2 goals to 1. The others have been all draws, drawing to Nottingham Forest, drawing to Manchester United, and drawing against Everton. 2 of those being 1 all draws, while the other was a goalless draw. That's for the game against Nottingham Forest. So clearly, Arsenal have not been in. That was some strong fun. Sorry about that. So really scary stuff. Like I said, it's raining out there, so anything could happen. Anyways, like I was saying, that kind of a run of events does not really give Arsenal very much confidence coming into this particular fixture. But what will give them the confidence is knowing that they've beaten Brentford at least 4 times in the last 5 meetings. As far as Brentford things are concerned, they've only won 1 in their last 5 fixtures, beating up against Bournemouth away from home by 2 goals to 1, then have drawn 2 games and lost 2 games. Those draws coming up against Chelsea and Everton. In fact, their last Premier League game was a goalless draw against Chelsea, while the losses did come against Aston Villa and Newcastle, respectively. Of course, they lost at Newcastle by 3 goals to 1, which was their only loss in the last 6 fixtures away from home in the Premier League. So that is quite telling that while their last 5, because they played 3 games at home and played 2 games away from home in the last 5, and they won 1 of those 2 games. That was against Bournemouth, and then lost to Newcastle. So, excuse me, they're quite a good side away from home, and there's a lot of players there that Arsenal will really be worried about facing. The likes of Brian Mbeumo, whose personal tally is at 16 Premier League goals so far this season. Yohan Wissa, one of those attacking threats in that Brentford forward. Mikel Damsgaard, a player quite very good, that has 10 assists to his name. Of course, positively, Christian Nogard. We are talking about a team that can beat up against any side on a given day. They are capable of, hurting any good side. However, let's look at the Arsenal's, possible lineup in the wake of the responsibilities that they do have come next week, the wake of the injuries that they do have. Of course, those are very pronounced, given that most of them have been very long-term injuries. Although the reports that Kai Havertz could make it back on time before the end of the season. Now, why is this important? Is that should Arsenal advance in the UEFA Champions League to the semi-finals and possibly to the finals, then maybe Kai Havertz could return and have a kick of the ball before the season ends. Although the initial reports from Arsenal were that he was out for the rest of the season and will be looking at recovery to return next season. But he has already started rehabilitation at the Sober Reality Center. That's at Arsenal's training ground. So, starting 11, Arsenal. David Raya in goal. I would go with Ben White if he's fit at right back. I'll go with Kian Tierney to start at left back. I'll go with Jakub Kivio in that centre back pairing and William Saliba. Why? Because, I mean, what Arsenal's alternatives are very limited, given that Carafiori is just returning from that injury. You didn't really want to throw him into the deep end as soon as he recovers from that injury. And then I do think that Jurriën Timber needs to be rested. Whether he's playing through injury or not, he needs. I get the feeling that he ought to be rested for this particular. In midfield, again, I wouldn't be against the idea of preserving Thomas Partey to be pressure because we saw what that looked like when he returned in action versus Real Madrid. Arguably, one of the best players that was on that pitch at the Emirates. So I would opt for a Jorginho in that midfield. Declan Rice had to, literally be substituted with some bit of, Nico there for a threat of an injury. So I wouldn't be surprised again to have him rested. So what would I do? Put Mikel Merino in that midfield alongside Martin Odegaard. Yes. And then I look forward to Leandro Trossard, Raheem Sterling starting, and Ethan Nwaneri. With all those, especially Sterling and Leandro Trossard interchangeably playing as the false nine. That would be my predicted lineup. But we all know Mikel Arteta is that bit of a stubborn manager. He could surprise us and field his best team. And anything is plausible for him. But that's what I think. Do let me know what you think. What's your prediction? My prediction is that Arsenal could win this one 2-1. If it does end in a draw, I wouldn't be surprised given the responsibilities and the bit of nerves that may revolve around their squad. Because it looks like they are prioritizing the UEFA Champions League much more than the Premier League. But they still need to win in the Premier League because it's not done and dusted. That they're not guaranteed even a second place finish because Nottingham Forest upon their heels in that second place. Anyways, allow me to wrap it at that for that Arsenal game and then look to the early kickoff between Crystal Palace and Manchester City. Another very, very entertaining fixture. Now, I do not think Crystal Palace is not one of those teams that really know how to beat up against Man City. But I think they beat them sometime back, a good long while ago. That game they won by 2-0 at the Etihad Stadium, a place that not so many teams go and win, by the way. But when you look at their last 5 meetings between these two sides, you'll see that Man City has really dominated them, winning 3 of the last 5 and drawing the other 2. Both those draws have been 2-all draws. So clearly, it's a game that does tend to produce goals for us, regardless of where and when it is played. So pretty much that's you should expect goals to come in this fixture because the first leg ended in a 2-all draw. That was at Selhurst Park. Last season, Man City went to Selhurst Park and beat Crystal Palace by 4-2. So you can see it's usually high scoring fixture. And then last season at the Etihad, again, it was a 2-all draw between the two sides. But then that very season, last season but one, when Man City visited the Selhurst Park, it was a 1-0 victory for Man City. And yet the reverse fixture or the earlier fixture at the Etihad had ended in another 4-2 victory for Man City. So clearly, it's a fixture that Man City does dominate, but, and this is a big but, is that they score so many goals. It's a high goal scoring fixture. As far as the last 5 fixtures are concerned, only one game has ended with 1 goal. All the others have produced at least 4 goals or more. So that's quite telling. However, Manchester City's recent form is not pretty. Is not pretty at all. When you look at their last 5 Premier League meetings, because they only have 2 wins, they have a loss and 2 draws. Their very last game was a goalless draw against Manchester United in that Manchester derby. So, and yet their only wins have come against Spurs, 1-0, and then beating up against Leicester City by 2-0, a game in which Pep Guardiola was furious that they could have scored more or should have scored more, while the 2 draws have come against United and Brighton. Brighton, that was a 2-2 draw. Crystal Palace on the other side have been, I think, one of the most on-form teams in recent times. Only 1 draw in their last 5 fixtures, that's in the Premier League, and they have won. They've won the 4. Most on form, so much so that they are into the semi-finals of the FA Cup. Yes, they do have a date, I think, with Manchester City, by the way. They did knock out Fulham, beating them by 3-0 at Craven Cottage. Yes, so all their victories have come against Brighton, who they did beat in the last meeting by 2-1. The draw did come against Southampton, surprisingly so, in a 1-1 draw. That game was away. And then they did beat up against Ipswich by 1-0, beat up against Aston Villa, blew away Aston Villa, beating them 4-1, and then beat up against Fulham by 2-0. Now, here's something. Crystal Palace are the second best on-form team in the Premier League behind the table leaders, Liverpool. Hear me out. Out of the last 10 Premier League matches, Liverpool are the only team that have collected more points from the last 10 Premier League fixtures than Crystal Palace. Liverpool have amassed 23 points out of the last 10 games, while Crystal Palace have amassed 22 points. So that's very telling. Another key factor is that Crystal Palace have only lost 3 games in their last 19 Premier League fixtures. That's another key fact. That's another key fact for you to think about ahead of this particular fixture. Away from home, again, they look to be the most on-form team because out of their last 10 away matches, they've won 6 and drawn 4. Could this be another draw? Early kickoffs are oftentimes very tricky for the big sides, especially. And I keep saying this over and over again. We did see that against Everton for Arsenal last weekend, although they did concede a very dubious penalty. That goes without saying. So, that goes without saying. But it's quite very telling. And like I said, 6 wins are out of 10 and 4 draws. No loss away from home in the last 10 fixtures. The last time Crystal Palace beat up against Man City was in 2021 by 2-0 at the Etihad. That's their only victory against Man City in the last 12 games. Could this be their second? My gut feeling says, yeah, their second victory against Man City in the last 13 games could come today. They're very good away from home. They do score the goals. Joan Philippe Mateta, I think since the start of the year, has scored 9 Premier League goals. Only Mo Salah has scored more, possibly 10. So, Joan Philippe Mateta, one of those goal threats in this Crystal Palace side. Recently, Eddie Nketiah has started scoring some goals for Crystal Palace. And that really puts him in a very good place. The last time Nottingham Forest lost a game away from home was back in October. And they did lose to Nottingham Forest. So clearly, their away form is. As listening to a podcast yesterday, and somebody reminded me of the fact that Oliver Glasner does usually have a very good second part of the season, and that's how things have gone for him. Remember, he did replace Patrick Vieira when he was sacked by Crystal Palace, and he came, I think, more than halfway the season, and Crystal Palace were being threatened by relegation, and he saved them from that. They went on a good run, won so many games. When they started this season, at some point it looked like they could be relegation contenders, and they were for the biggest chunk of the season. And at some point, I did mention that if he wasn't too careful, he could equally be sacked, but they stuck with him. Because the first 10 Premier League games didn't really go well for them, and even more. But He's changed things. He's changed their fortunes. He's changed the tides, really, and they've been quite impressive ever since then. So when you look at where they are in the Premier League table, uh, just a second. Yes, they are as high as 11 with 43 points, only 2 points behind Bournemouth. Yes, only 2 points behind Bournemouth. But remember, Crystal Palace do have a game in hand. That game in hand is against Newcastle because Newcastle on that weekend, I think, were in action against Liverpool for the Carabao Cup finals, which, of course, we all know they beat up against Liverpool by 2-1 for that one. So clearly, this is very telling. So Crystal Palace's form versus Manchester City's bad form recently, where they've only managed 2 wins, 1 loss and 2 draws in the last 5, versus Crystal Palace's 4 wins and 1 draw in the last 5, should be telling to us or what the kind of fixture we should expect. Yes, Man City have scored at the start of this year, did score so many goals. But when you look at the last 5 fixtures, they've not scored so many goals. In fact, they scored, I think, about 6 goals. 2-2 against Brighton, so they scored 2. Then their win against Leicester, they scored 2. And their 1-0 victory against Spurs. That's all they've scored. They lost to Nottingham Forest by 2-0, 2-0 against Manchester United. So, clearly, their goal scoring form tells you. What's your prediction for this one? A bit of a hard one to call, given it's an early kickoff. But I'm going to go with Crystal Palace winning this one too by 2-1. Now, there is a motivation for Pep Guardiola is that they are currently 6th on the Premier League table with 52 points, 1 point behind Newcastle. Pep Guardiola knows it that finishing in the top 5 is very crucial because it earns you a slot in the UEFA Champions League next season. And that could be the motivation that helps them win this particular game. Against my own judgment or anticipation for a prediction. So that is out there because Newcastle are ahead of them and yet they have a game in hand. 2, if Manchester United go ahead and win the UEFA Europa League, they earn themselves a place in next season's UEFA Champions League. How embarrassing would that be if Manchester United earn the slot in the UEFA Champions League next season and finish in the second bottom, or sorry, in the bottom half of the Premier League table because they are 13th with 38 points. 4 points behind Brentford, who are in 12th place. I mean, what would that mean for Man City? If you're Man City, you end up finishing 6th, you do not qualify for the UEFA Champions League, and the team that finished 13th or 14th, Manchester United, because they've won the UEFA Europa League, your direct rivals, your same city rivals, have earned a place in the UEFA Champions League. I'm sure Pep Guardiola would want to avoid that embarrassment. So there's that. So really put food for thought and plenty to think about for Manchester City going into this particular fixture. So we've talked about Palace's impressive form for their goal scoring, Man City's low goal scoring record in recent times, and that kind of thing. And that's why all those factors combined is why I think that Crystal Palace may nick this one by 2-1. They're in a good mood. They really feel confident about themselves. And there's no better time to beat up against Manchester City than this moment in time. Then, maybe before we close it out, because unfortunately we won't be able to preview all these games today. We'll look to preview the other fixtures in possibly maybe tomorrow, especially the Sunday fixtures. But I do want us to look at least one more fixture, and that's the Liverpool fixture against West Ham. And the reason as to why this is very crucial is one, because West Ham have a very bad form or bad reputation against Liverpool. They've only drawn 1 of the last 5. All the others have been losses, including a 5-0 thumping that Liverpool treated to West Ham this season. at the London Stadium. So, and then of course Liverpool are in that happy mood, having announced the new deals for Mohamed Salah, who put pen to paper to a 2-year contract extension, and Virgil van Dijk also signing a 2-year deal. Of course, Trent Alexander-Arnold was the third player that they did want to tie down to a new contract, but we all know that Real Madrid have quoted him, and they do have an agreement in principle for Alexander Trent Arnold to join the Whites for next season. So we'll wait and see how that fares out. So, I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it. So, when you're Liverpool, you want to win the Premier League title, you're home against West Ham, a team that has struggled this season, and they are 16th on the Premier League table with 35 points. Literally, for a better part of the season, did stare down the spread of relegation. I mean, beat them and throw yourself closer to winning the Premier League title. That's all they need to do, and I think they can do it. While West Ham have good players, the likes of Thomas Tuchel, the likes of Lucas Paqueta, who is, by the way, still under investigation for flouting betting rules. We all know Mikel Antonio suffered that car accident that has kept him out, ruled him out for a full year with injury, and that kind of thing. Although they do have Emerson, that guy that did score a very stunning free kick against Arsenal when Arsenal was beating them 5-2 or 4-2, something like that. They do have a Gerard Bowen in there, a couple of Mohamed Kudus, very decent players. Their problems have really been about the way they defend. I mean, they've not really defended well. Whether you put Alfonso Aguilera in goal, whether you put Lucas Fabianski, for as long as that defense is not defending, it's not really look pretty. They are holding midfield and their defense has not looked pretty. They have a Constance, they have Mavropanos, the former Arsenal defender, who they did sign, I think, from Stuttgart. Now, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, he's been one of those good guys who fairly had, a decent season ever since signing him from Manchester United. But overall, they just do not defend well. They just do not defend well. And that's what has really cost them for the biggest part of the season. And Graham Potter will be looking to change those fortunes. However, even when Liverpool do come in this particular fixture on the back of a 3-2 loss to Fulham, I do not really think that this is the day they lose another game. And I do not think that tomorrow will be the day they lose to West Ham, having not lost to them in the last 5. So, when you look at the form table, of course, Liverpool have it better because they've only lost 1 in the last 5. All the others were wins, beating against Everton by 0-0, beating Southampton 3-1, beating Newcastle 2-0, beating Man City 2-0, and that kind of thing. Across all competitions, Liverpool have had their days. But that notwithstanding, West Ham on the other side, 2 losses, 2 draws, 1 win out of the last 5. Their only win come against Leicester City. We all know Leicester City are shambolic. I mean, they're winless in 8-9 games? Leicester City don't score goals. Yes, West Ham struggle to score goals as well, but they've lost to Newcastle by 0-0, drawn with Everton 1-1, lost to Wolverhampton Wanderers by 0-0, drawn with Bournemouth by 2-2 in their last fixture. So overall, when you look at some of these teams, clearly it's going to be one-way traffic for me. And my expectation is that Liverpool will win this one, probably 3-0 or 3-1. Yeah, do let me know what your prediction is, and do let me know what other fixture that you would want us to preview. Maybe in tomorrow's podcast, maybe on another day, but it's so far we are into 34 minutes of this live broadcast. Thank you for the guys that have been able to tune in. If you're new, do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Do not forget to like and comment. Thank you for those that always dedicate us the time to maybe the time to watch. But I think the biggest fixture of the weekend will be between Manchester United and Newcastle. Although I think Manchester United will lose. I mean, between them drawing against Man City by goal to nil, sorry, with a goalless draw, and them drawing against Lyon in the UEFA Europa League, drawing late, thanks to Andre Onana giving away the gifts. I do think Manchester United are bound to lose. I get the feeling that they will lose this Newcastle game and win against Lyon. That's my feeling. Because across the entire season, they've had that. They've blown hot and cold. They win, draw, lose, win, draw. They've not won 2 games consecutively this season. So you're talking about a Newcastle side that is in very high spirits. Why? Because they won the Carabao Cup. And when you look at the last 5 fixtures in the Premier League, they've only lost once. And that loss came against Liverpool, losing by 2 goals to nil. I mean, it is Liverpool, the title contenders, the team that is going to win the Premier League. That's the team that they lost to. Their victories have come against, Leicester City, who they beat by 3 goals to nil. Leicester City didn't win in that one. They beaten Brentford 2-1. They beat a goal to nil. They beaten Nottingham Forest by 4 goals to 3. Quite an impressive result. United on the other side, only 2 wins in the last 5. Those wins up against Leicester City and Ipswich Town. Pretty much the teams that you'd expect them to win. And then, of course, those against Man City, they drew against Arsenal, and they lost to Nottingham Forest in pretty Manchester United style. Do not lose to Arsenal, do not lose to Man City. Beat Leicester, beat Ipswich, lose to Nottingham Forest. That's been Manchester United this season. And when you look at the last 5 meetings between Manchester United and Newcastle, I mean, okay, Newcastle have had it better because United have only won 1 of the last 5, the other being a draw, and Newcastle have won 3 of those. This season at Old Trafford, Newcastle beat Manchester United by 2 goals to nil. Last season, Manchester United beat Newcastle at Old Trafford by 3-2. Then Newcastle beat United at St. James's Park by goal to nil last season. And then the season prior, Newcastle beat United at St. James's Park by 2 goals to nil, while the away, that was at Old Trafford, was a goalless draw. So today, this weekend's game is at St. James's Park, where they've won the last 2 visits. That's why I think Manchester United will lose by 2-1, 2-0. Anyways, do let me know what your predictions are. Otherwise, allow me to wrap it here and wish you a wonderful weekend. I'll catch you guys prior to the kickoff between Manchester City and Crystal Palace. If I get the time, I will be here to. We'll see if we can do an episode before the kickoff that particular game. Look at the starting lineups that will be issued out for the teams. Right. Otherwise, stay blessed and have a wonderful rest of the weekend. Bye-bye.